Begin by removing the two 15mm nuts that secure the brake master cylinder to the brake booster. Slide the brake master cylinder forward off of the studs on the brake booster. Remove the hose clamp and upper hose from the brake booster. Using a flare nut wrench, remove the hydraulic line from the brake booster. Again, use a flare nut wrench to remove the hydraulic line from the brake booster. Now we move inside the cabin. Working under the dash, remove the metal clip that retains the brake light switch to the brake pedal assembly. Now that the clip's removed, remove the brake booster actuator rod and brake light switch from the brake pedal assembly. I wasn't able to film it, but now you'll remove the four 15mm nuts that secure the brake booster to the firewall. Moving back under the hood, pull the brake master cylinder forward to give enough room to pull the brake booster out of the firewall and out of the engine compartment. It's a little bit tricky. It might take a little bit of wiggling, but it will come out. the brake booster removed from the truck, we can get a better look at our leak. The seal here has been leaking for quite some time, as you can see from the buildup underneath the brake booster. Here is our brake booster rebuild kit. To disassemble the brake booster, we'll be removing 5 E12 headed bolts around the perimeter of the booster. These bolts can be rather tight, so it helps to have the brake booster in a vise. If you don't have a vise like me, you can use a pry bar or another long rod between the studs that go through the firewall to brace the brake booster while you break these bolts loose. After removing the bolts, a light tap of the hammer will help get the two halves of the brake booster to come loose. Be careful when opening the brake booster. There are several plungers and springs, and you don't want them shooting off and getting lost during the disassembly. Here's where our main leak is coming from. There is a lip seal inside of this bore that is allowing power steering fluid to get past it, and is coming out of that weep hole between the brake master cylinder and the brake booster, and that's what our accumulation is underneath. And you can use a small pick to get under this seal and pry it up. Just be careful not to scratch or scar the bores with the pick while removing the seal. Before installing our new seal, I'll take a little bit of brake parts clean, just to clean up the accumulation of power steering fluid from our leak, and make sure that the groove in which the new seal will sit will be completely clean of any fluid, trash, or debris. Once our bore's clean, we'll take our old seal and compare it to the new seal in our kit. It helps to put a little bit of power steering fluid on the seal when installing it, but just carefully collapse that seal, press it into the bore, and get it seated in its groove. When installing the seal, make sure that the lit part of the seal faces outwards towards you and towards the piston in which it's going to seal against. Now that our new seal is installed and flush, we'll take a rag and some brake parts clean and make sure that all the old power steering fluid that's leaked on the housing halves is cleaned up. Now we'll remove the old seal from the housing. Make sure to take a rag and brake clean and clean off any old power steering fluid or any contaminants before we install our new seal from our kit. Now we're ready to reassemble our Hydroboost assembly. We'll reinstall all the springs and pistons in their correct orientation. And reassembling the Hydroboost, the top plunger has a groove near the back side of it. What you want to do is align the groove with the pins on the fork inside of the housing. You can't see it right here in this with this angle, but there's a little fork in there with a pin on either side, and you just want to put that groove over top of those pins to secure it together. During reassembly, be sure to guide the brake booster actuator rod through the hole in the front. As you saw there, I used a pocket screwdriver to align that through the hole. That's what actually pushes on the back of the brake master cylinder to apply hydraulic force to the brake system. It takes a little bit of force to get the two halves together. The bottom piston is kind of reluctant to go inside of that new seal because it's a lot tighter than the old seal was. Just make sure that everything's aligned correctly before you get your halves together. Once you get your halves together, run your 5 E12 headed bolts back into the housing halves. I couldn't find a torque specification for these bolts in the factory service manual or anywhere online, so I torqued them to, I believe, 25 foot-pounds in a crisscrossing pattern. Now that we have our brake booster reassembled, we're ready to reinstall it in the pickup truck. As with removal, it's a little bit tricky to get it in there, but take your time and you can get it snaked down through there into the firewall and butt it up with the brake master cylinder. Back in the cabin, we reinstall the 4 15mm nuts and torque them to 24 foot-pounds and reinstall our brake light switch and rod with clip-on brake pedal assembly. Now we install the 2 15mm nuts that secure the brake master cylinder to the brake booster and torque them to 27 foot-pounds. Now we'll reinstall our rubber hose with hose clamp. with everything back together, we will check our power steering fluid level and top it up as needed. It's most likely going to be low due to the amount of fluid we lost in the brake booster when we removed it and disassembled it. Now we're ready to bleed the air from our system. What we'll do is start the vehicle and let it idle. After we've started it, we will go back under the hood and check around all the hoses and lines and around the brake booster itself to make sure we don't have any external leaks. If no external leaks are found, we will begin bleeding the air from the system. What you want to do is turn your steering wheel from lock to lock. You may hear some whining from the power steering pump during this time. As you turn it back and forth, you will work the air out of the system, and that whining should subside relatively quickly. You'll want to take and actuate your brake pedal 3 or 4 times, and in a moment you'll see that I shut the truck off. What we'll do is turn the engine off and depress the brake pedal between 3 and 5 times just to bleed that pressure out of the booster and force any trapped air out into the reservoir, power steering reservoir. Start the truck back up, turn your steering wheel back and forth, pump the pedal some more, cut the engine off, another 3 to 5 pedal presses. Just continue this until you've got a firm brake pedal feel again, and you don't have any whining from the power steering pump when you're turning your wheel back and forth. Once we've got that pretty much worked out, we'll cut the engine off, go back under the hood, check to make sure we still have no leaks. We'll top up our power steering fluid if needed and go for a test drive. Back from the test drive, we take a mirror and look underneath the brake booster at the weep hole location, and we can still see that everything is dry underneath and we have no more leaking, so we'll call that a fix.